and welcome to your Newsmax Daily for October 17th, 2024, the 42nd Thursday of the year and National Pasta Day, one of the easiest, quickest, most inexpensive, and delicious meals you could possibly make. And now that we have dinner all squared away, 2 weeks from today is Halloween and the final day of the month. 5 days after that is Election Day. Finally.
You and I both know what I'm talking about. I actually don't.
What are you talking about?
I really don't know what you're talking about. And either does anyone else. Let's get right to it. The vice president's interview, starting with the great Greg Kelly.
On to the big interview. You heard about that, right? On Fox News, Bret Baier sitting down with Kamala Harris for what? Her third interview? The big interview. The big interview. It's kind of pathetic that, she should be doing hundreds of these things. She should have been doing them over the past year and a half. The whole damn thing is a scam. Having said that, I thought Bret Baier did a pretty good job. I give him a B+, a high B+, maybe a very low A-. There's a couple of things, good and not so good. She was a disaster. But before we get to the interview, how absurd is this situation? She becomes a candidate. This is July. And then in August, she still hasn't done an interview, right? And what does she say? When will you do what every candidate does, basically the moment they announce and before they announce it? For 2 years, you just do it. You're politicians. You're supposed to like doing this stuff. Check it out.
Madam Vice President, there's been a lot of questions about when you're going to sit down for your first interview since being the nominee. Do you have any update on that?
I've talked to my team. I want us to get an interview scheduled before the end of the month.
Thank you. What do you make about it?
Before the end of the month. How big of you? On August 8th, you promised to do one at the end of the month. You should. It's insane. This whole thing, this master plan that they came up with to bring this woman over the finish line, and they're getting away with it in a way. CNN, they did it at the end of the month. Kinda, right? Just in the nick of the time. Remember that one? Then they sat down with some local news guy a couple of weeks later. Okay, 60 Minutes. More recently, this is not transparency, right? This is the Biden redux. Remember the Biden campaign in 2020? In the basement? This is the same type of scam. I knew they were going to pull one. I didn't know it would be this big. I didn't know it would be this in your face, this insulting to the American people, but here they go. All right, so tonight was on Fox News, Bret Baier and Kamala Harris, and man, she got angry.
Talked about locking people up because they disagree with him. This is a democracy. And in a democracy, the president of the United States, in the United States of America, should be willing to be able to handle criticism without saying he'd lock people up for doing it.
Angry and dishonest. President Trump does not talk about that. They are lying about him all the time. Think President Trump threatens people who criticize him with arrest? When does that happen? He gets criticized every microsecond of every day from billions of people across the planet. It doesn't stop him. He's not talking about that. She is lying. All right, what was the other thing? Let's see what happens here. SOT number 2.
Joe Biden, I have watched from the Oval Office to the Situation Room, and he has the judgment and the experience to do exactly what he has done in making very important decisions on behalf of the American people.
There were no concerns raised?
Brett, Joe Biden is not on the ballot.
I understand.
And Donald Trump
but
is.
You talked about it.
And Donald Trump
After George Clooney said within a few minutes of talking to President Biden at a fundraiser that he thought this was not the same Joe Biden that we saw on the debate stage.
Donald Trump is on the ballot.
I understand. You met with him at least once a week for 3.5 years. You didn't have any concerns?
I think the American people have a concern about Donald Trump, which is why the people who know him best, including leaders of our national security community, have all spoken out. Even people who worked for him in the Oval Office, worked with him in the Situation Room, and have said he is unfit and dangerous and should never be president of the United States again, including his former vice president, which is why the job was open for him to choose another running mate. So that is a fact. That is a fact.
A fact. Actually, the people who have come out against him from his administration were deep staters who want to stay in the deep state, and did not know President Trump before politics. They have their own agenda. But again, credit to Brett, the way he asked the question. And I want to go back to that moment when he brings it up. And she is kind of stumped at first.
But
you call Donald Trump.
The significance of that.
You call Donald Trump. He's misguided. You say now
he's unstable. He is unstable, Brett.
He's not well. You say he's mentally not stable.
He's not stable.
Let me ask you this. You told many interviewers that Joe Biden was on his game, that ran around circles on his staff. When did you first notice that President Biden's mental faculties appeared diminished?
Joe Biden.
That was a good moment, huh? Just like Joe Biden. And then you saw the answer. We played that already. And then she tries to steer it to Trump. This woman is totally unqualified. I see it again. The liberals are saying this was great. It wasn't. It really is wild how we see things so differently. Or they refuse to see the truth. That's more like it.
Greg Kelly is the host of Greg Kelly Reports, 9 o'clock Eastern on Newsmax. Not only did she steer that question back to Donald Trump, but her answer to every question essentially started with Donald Trump.
They say the country is on the wrong track. If it's on the wrong track, that track follows 3.5 years of you being vice president and President Biden being president. That is what they're saying, 79% of them. Why are they saying that? If you're turning the page, you've been in office for 3.5 years.
And Donald Trump has been running for office.
That reminded me of the Lester Holt interview when he says, "You've never been to the border." And she says, "Yeah, well, I've never been to Europe either." "You dated Jeffrey Epstein." "Yeah, well, Donald Trump knew Jeffrey Epstein." That didn't actually come up, but that would likely be her answer. And why hasn't anyone ever really talked about whatever relationship she had with Jeffrey Epstein and what she may have known or participated in? This is Rob Schmidt with Trish Regan, chief editor of 76research.com.
The best was the answer of just, about 80% of the people think we're on the wrong track. And she says, well, that's because Donald Trump's been running for president for the last couple years. Oh,
I can't believe it.
Okay.
I mean, you would think, that somebody would have coached her, helped her along. Look, she wasn't doing any media forever. She never got out there and answered the tough questions. I mean, Donald Trump yesterday out there in Chicago, right? Yeah. Answering the questions on tariffs, dusting it up with the British guy from Bloomberg. Hey, you know what? That needs to happen. The American people need to know, why do you think tariffs are good and he thinks it's bad? Yeah. She can't answer those questions. She couldn't answer Brett's questions.
You get good through practice. I mean, I'm sure the first time that Trump took tough questions, it wasn't pretty, but you do it enough and it's a skill that you develop. If you hide from it, when you actually have to do it because it's October and you're bleeding out, you're in real trouble.
But it's not just that. It's also that he knows it, right? Yeah. Like it's in his core. He actually believes this stuff. Yeah. I don't know what she believes. She doesn't even know. She's telling everybody to, at the press pool to go look at the memo that they sent out because she doesn't own it.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
Rob Schmidt with Trish Regan on Rob Schmidt tonight at 7 o'clock Eastern on Newsmax. Last night, at some point during the interview, Elon Musk posted one of the exchanges of the interview and said, how is it even possible that this person is a candidate for president? Elon also posted the new Trump campaign ad featuring him at the Butler, Pennsylvania rally. It is really good. I retweeted it this morning at radio_Marino on X, or maybe if you're one of the 201 million people that follow Musk, you've already seen it. But if not, go check it out. It's really cool. So there's going to be plenty of talk about last night's interview, and Donald Trump was in Miami yesterday for a town hall on Spanish network Univision, or Univision.
¿Quién haría ese trabajo?
If you deport to these people, who would do that job?
A lot of people come into our country. We just want them to come in legally through a system because they've released hundreds of thousands of people that are murderers, drug dealers, terrorists.
His explanation about what to do with the border, in terms of the border, I think it was a concise answer.
That was an audience member after the event, and this may have been the highlight of the whole town hall.
What are the 3 virtues that you see in Vice President Kamala Harris?
That's a very hard question. That's the toughest question. The other ones are easy. Look, I'm not a fan. I think she's harmed our country horribly at the border, with inflation, with so many other things. But she seems to have an ability to survive. Because, she was out of the race and all of a sudden she's running for president. That's a great ability that some people have and some people don't have. She seems to have some pretty long-time friendships, and that's, also, I don't call that an ability. I call that a good thing. And she seems to have a nice way about her. I mean, I like the way, some of her statements, some of her, the way she behaves in a certain way. But in another way, I think it's very bad for our country, But she does seem to have some relationships that be lasting. And she does seem to be a survivor. Because remember, she was the first one out, and all of a sudden she's running for president. And the other 21 people that are running, they're sitting home watching her on television, right? So that's by far the toughest question I've had today.
Donald Trump at the Univision town hall in Miami yesterday. Harris was asked the same question. Give 3 things that you like about Donald Trump, or that you can say positive. She was asked that question at an event last week, and she said she liked how much love he had or appeared to have for his family, something like that. It is a really good humanizing question. J.D. Vance had a rally yesterday in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. We'll get to that in a moment. But first, back to Rob Schmitt, who also spoke with Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz about Vance's exchange with ABC over the Venezuelan gangs in Colorado from Sunday. You remember that? And the border in general.
In Aurora, Colorado, revealing the gang members have seized control of several apartments, allegedly assaulting one of their employees and attempting to shake down the company. You can see the damage to the man's face there on the screen, and you can see the assault bottom right. The company claims nothing substantial has been done to crack down on that gang. Colorado liberal leaders just acting like it's not happening, like Jared Polis. Congressman Matt Gaetz joins us now to talk about more of this. I mean, I think this is a big thing that people are voting for in this election, right? Is like, I'm tired of watching this country be run by fools, in so many different ways. How do we have Tren de Aragua operating in New York City? We got 11-year-olds putting guns to people's head and taking their wallets. How do we have, Afghan refugees? We're bringing people in that are trying to blow us up on Election Day. Go ahead.
Denial is indeed the first stage of grief, right? And the mainstream media and the Democrats in power tell us that it's not real that people who are dangerous and might harm us on Election Day were passed through an insufficient vetting process. And you shouldn't really worry that it's only a few apartment complexes in Colorado who are being overtaken by this Venezuelan violent gang. And actually, I think that the perspective of American leaders should be that no apartment complexes should be overtaken by
like
Venezuelan gangs in our country. One is too many.
Right.
But at the same time, there's a permission structure being set up where a certain amount of violence and danger is acceptable so long as it achieves these social gains of allowing illegal people into our country. And that's not what we signed up for. It's certainly not what voters in these swing states have signed up for.
It's unbelievable. And let's talk about this. I am blown away by this Tren de Aragua gang. I mean, these are some of the most vicious people in the world. And they're coming here and they're setting up shop. They're taking these kids in these migrant camps that we've set up all throughout our cities in this country. They're turning them into Tren de Aragua members. You've got them running around New York, robbing people. They beat the hell out of this apartment manager in Aurora. They have taken over these apartment complexes, even though it's just a few, they try to tell you. Here's the NYPD Assistant Chief of Detectives revealing the amount of crime being committed by this gang just here in New York City. Take a look.
Upwards of 50 robberies, 20 individuals arrested for upwards of 50 robberies and out of those 20 individuals, every single one of them is on the streets today.
So you're walking around, you come to New York because your kids want to see Times Square. You get dragged here, you're spending all this money, you're walking down the street, Times Square, you're walking by Bubba Gump Shrimp and all this crap that I can't stand in Times Square, and you're seeing everything, and you got all of a sudden 12 Venezuelan kids run up with knives and one's got a gun, and they take everything off of you. We've imported this into this country. That's the reality we've imported.
You've imported it and you're paying for it. And we're now seeing the late stages of sanctuary city policy and sanctuary state policy. When you invite the third world into your community, you get third world consequences. And that's probably not what the people signed up for who live in their $1 million penthouses in Manhattan. But that's what's coming to the suburbs of America, the slums of the third world. And it's not by accident. It's not like climate change or the Illuminati somewhere. It's a direct consequence of us allowing our borders to be open, and then the pull factors in our country where we're giving things away to illegals like housing and health care.
Florida Representative Matt Gaetz on Rob Schmitt tonight, and listen very closely to this.
I want to get to one more thing. You've recently demanded communications from the DHS that may relate to Kamala's job as border czar. A FOIA request at the Heritage Oversight Project. Kamala's propagator, Ian Sams, is trying to block those documents from being released. You claim it might violate the Hatch Act. Tell us what exactly you're after.
Well, we asked for the documents regarding Kamala Harris's role as border czar, and the person who didn't allow us to access those records, who denied them, weeks later ended up working for Kamala Harris's presidential campaign. Right. So we think that when you're transitioning from government office to the campaign office and you're limiting public review of that which is highly dispositive to the operations of government, you've definitely violated the law, certainly the Hatch Act. And why would we allow this? Why wouldn't the American people want to see the authority that this person was granted and the extent to which that it was violated in allowing the borders to remain open?
The things they pull all the time. They always have something up their sleeve. That's another one.
Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz with one of the many probes or investigations in the House right now. And as I mentioned, Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio, the Republican vice presidential nominee, was also on the campaign trail yesterday.
But whether they've got the basic competence to do the job in the first place. And if Kamala Harris, every time they ask her a question, she can't answer basic details about how she wants to govern this country, then how can we ever trust her in a room with Vladimir Putin or Xi Jinping? The answer is we can't. So let's send somebody we can trust. Let's send Donald J. Trump back to the White House. Now, I want to talk about, one of the biggest issues I hear from, not just in Pennsylvania, but all across the country, is we hear a lot about people not being able to afford a home. And, I'm the first person of the millennial generation to ever appear on a national ticket. And I know that a lot of folks in my generation, they're frankly very angry at something that they would like to be able to do that their parents' generation could do, but they can't, which is to afford a nice home on a normal job in their own community. And Donald Trump and I want to rebuild that American dream. We want to make it affordable for our young people to buy a home in the nation that their parents and grandparents built. That's a simple thing that we can get back to if we've got better leadership. But but the media does this thing where they say, well, there's no connection between the border policies and the housing crisis that we have in our country. And I think any of us with a lick of common sense, we're saying, whoa, wait. Here, explain to me this, Kamala Harris. When you let in 25 million illegal aliens into this country, people who shouldn't be here, we got to house them somewhere. And if you're giving 25 million illegal aliens homes that ought by right go to American citizens, then you are making the American dream of homeownership unaffordable for our people. American homes ought to go to American citizens, and that simple principle is something that Donald Trump and I are going to fight for.
Republican vice presidential nominee Senator J.D. Vance in Pennsylvania. And let's wrap up today's podcast with political analyst Mark Halpern on this morning's edition of Wake Up America with Charlotte McBride and Allison Maloney.
Mark, I've been excited to talk to you about this. I want to know what you think of her performance last night.
Well, I looked at a lot of news in the battleground states today, and it's barely mentioned. So what I really think is it's probably a non-event. We can all analyze it. You can listen to people say it was a triumph. You can listen to people say it was a car crash. I think in the end, it's a non-event because what matters is an impact on the voters and what they hear about it. And I don't see much, again, in the 7 states that matter. In terms of the interview itself, I think the highlight for her was being feisty and separating herself a little bit from Joe Biden, saying, I think, undercovered so far, that her administration would not be a continuation of his. That's a pretty big break, at least symbolically. I think her evasiveness, her failure to address the tough questions that were asked on issues like immigration, and her saying, I'll follow the law on several issues, rather than saying what her actual position was. I thought if you're a voter who thinks she's vague, she's not offering explanations, and she's just attacking Donald Trump, I think that made it a weak interview.
Yeah, in the last few weeks, we've had several Democratic strategists and several Democrats who were hoping to vote for Kamala Harris. But every time we talk to them, they say they just need to know more. They need to hear more from her about what she truly believes in, what her policies are. And I don't feel like we got a lot of that. Instead, it seemed like most of the time she was just flipping the script and wanting to talk about Donald Trump. This was the very first question asked to her by Bret Baier last night. He said, so how many illegal immigrants do you estimate have been released into the country in the last 3.5 years? So he's asking a direct question. I think he wanted a direct response. Here is the response that she gave. Take a listen.
Brett, let's just get to the point. Okay, the point is that we have a broken immigration system that needs to be repaired.
So your Homeland Security Secretary said that 85% of apprehensions.
I'm not finished. Exactly.
21. It was essentially a pathway to citizenship for the.
Finish?
Yes, ma'am.
May I finish responding, please? But you have to let me finish.
You
please.
had the White House and the House and the Senate, and they didn't bring up that bill.
I'm responding to the point you're raising,
okay.
And I'd like to finish.
Yes, ma'am.
We, from day one, that to the point of this being your first question, it is a priority.
Mark, he just asked for a number. He asked a direct question. He only had 20 minutes. Now, we were told that she showed up 15 minutes late to the interview. It was supposed to be 30 to 45 minutes. And then her team got there and said, no, it's only going to be 20 minutes. They were under that time crunch because, as we know, Brett goes on live at 6 o'clock at night. What did you make of that? It seemed like just a lot of talk, not a lot of real answers.
Well, a lot of her interviews, even the softball ones, she seemed to just be trying to get through them and to run out the clock.
Yeah.
And give long answers. You know, I think Brett has been criticized in some quarters for being aggressive and interrupting her. She is the vice president. She's owed some deference. On the other hand, if you've given a short interview and you sense that your interview subject is filibustering and not answering, as you said, the question there or elsewhere, you know, he made the choice to be pretty aggressive about interrupting. But that didn't necessarily lead to answers. Of all the questions that Brett followed up on, the one you showed, several others of transgender surgery, etc., she never did answer. So for all of his interrupting and of all of her attempts to pin her down, stuff she didn't want to be pinned down on, she was not. The one exception was saying how she'd be different than President Biden. Again, not in the specific policy realm, but a pretty big rhetorical break. Beyond that, she said what she wanted to say in a way that was consistent with what she said in the past or not said in the past. This is the third or fourth attempt to pin her down on taking accountability for what's happened at the border on her watch. She would not be pinned down.
That is Newsmax chief political analyst Mark Halpern, who makes two excellent points there. Politicians tend to give a very long-winded answer to questions, whether they're actually answering the question or not. He said Bret Baier was a little aggressive because you have to be if you want to try and get any questions answered, right? He was given 20 minutes and she showed up late. I have interviewed dozens of members of Congress and presidential candidates over the years. And on the radio especially, it is a constant fight against the clock. If you do not interrupt them or cut them off, you're generally not going to get to ask many questions, and the audience is just going to hear the main talking point that the candidate or politician wants to get out there. It's definitely not as easy as you think or as it may look. Brett did a really good job of trying to be forceful and respectful at the same time. It's a delicate balance. As Mark mentioned, she is the VP, so you do have to give her a certain level of respect. The second really good point that Mark made is that unfortunately, in the grand scheme of things, it's really not that big of a deal. The people that like her, the people that are going to vote for her last night is not going to change anything. A lot of them probably didn't even watch it because it was on Fox. And yeah, for anybody that may still be on the fence, it wasn't that good for her. But in the grand scheme of things, it's not as big of a deal as conservatives are making it sound today. Just like everything the liberal media is saying right now about Trump's Univision rally is not really a big deal, right? And there was one other big historical political event yesterday, the memorial service of Ethel Kennedy, the widow of Senator and U.S. Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, the mother of Robert F. Kennedy, Jr.
She became a passionate advocate for everything, from juvenile justice to civil rights to environmental protection. Well into her 80s, she's still out there marching for something.
Ethel was a hero in her own right, full of character, full of integrity and empathy.
Ethel Kennedy was 96 years old. And the guy that was arrested outside the Trump rally in Riverside County, California, back on Saturday is now suing the sheriff who said his arrest may have prevented another assassination attempt of President Trump. You remember that on Monday? Riverside County Sheriff Chad Bianco is an open Trump supporter, apparently. The 49-year-old suspect, part of a sovereign citizens group, claims he had 2 guns that were legal in his home state of Nevada and that he was no threat to the former president, and he's now suing the Riverside County Sheriff's Office for defamation. Can't make this stuff up, only in America. On Wall Street, stocks opened well into the green, a morning rally after closing higher yesterday with the Dow Jones Industrial Average hitting a new record high of 43,078. And during its earnings call, snack giant PepsiCo said it will begin reversing what has become known as shrinkflation by adding as much as 20% more snack food into some of its packaging without raising the price. Hallelujah to that. And be sure to keep up with all of the news all day and night on Newsmax at Newsmax.com, and make sure you're streaming on Newsmax Plus for the most complete lineup of all your favorite shows, hosts, and guests like political analyst Mark Halpern, Governor Mike Huckabee, Senator Rick Santorum, Hogan Gidley, Judge Napolitano, Alan Dershowitz, and many, many others. I'm Tony Marino. Thank you, as always, for listening to the Newsmax Daily. Continue to share it with your friends and family. Enjoy the rest of your day. Pasta is on the menu. And keep on fighting the good fight.
News breaks every minute, every day. You need the app, the Newsmax app. Find it free on your smartphone store. Then watch us anytime, anywhere.
Information. Truth is freedom. Is Newsmax.